So I thought it was about time we kind of go over how we can integrate our vets into the construction industry. So I figured I would talk to somebody who knows a little bit about it, Deacon Taylor. He's been in the military and in construction, so who better person to go over this with? Him and I we actually went through college together. So he took the college route, I took the college route. I don't know who was more successful in the college route.
I was the anomaly. I actually had a 4.0 through the entire program.
So he did way better than me. What the hell?
You know why though? I figured out that all you had to do is repeat whatever the professor said, even if it was wrong. All you had to do is repeat it and you did just fine.
That's it. Yeah.
That's the secret to college.
I totally dug in my heels. I was like, you tell me to do this, you can't tell me what to do. I'm not gonna do that. Dang it. All right, take notes if you're going to college. Follow his footsteps, not mine. Can you elaborate on, I've talked with some people in the industry, I've talked with you about this before, about integration of vets back into the workforce, not necessarily just construction, but the workforce as a whole. Can you elaborate on this?
Well, I can give you from my perspective. So I was in the military from 92 to 2000, got hurt and was asked to leave the military with a back injury, pretty significant one. Was able to go through a vocational rehabilitation program, which is what landed me at college. Not my plan at all. I had zero intention of ever having a college degree. But the integration process out of the military, I think, is a very similar story for most. Obviously, I can't speak for every veteran because everybody has their own path and their own story. But the bulk of the veterans that I interact with, the story is very similar. You go into the military with not really an understanding of how dynamic it will affect who you are and shape your life from then on. From the basic training to the advanced individual trainings to additional trainings that you take, there's a culture, there's a lifestyle that is incorporated into it. It becomes your entire world. And the discipline, the structure, the every day-to-day task is detailed to the just nth degree, from the way you roll your socks to the way you put your ribbons on your uniform. It is just so regimented and structured. And then you get into the civilian world and it's just chaos. There's no structure, there's no discipline, there's no organization for the most part. And you see employees talking to supervisors, managers, bosses, owners, and just with complete disregard and with no tact. And you're like, what is this? Like, if I did that, I would be chewed up and spit out for what they just did. So it's a big struggle for a lot of us, especially in the initial phase. Depending on where you went, depending on what you were exposed to in the military, it could be even harder and longer. But they say it takes anywhere from 2 to 15 years for somebody to really reintegrate back into the civilian world and back into the workforce without having the remnants of the military, where you can't just walk up and say, oh, that guy was a vet. That girl, she was a vet. It just takes some time to transition back.
What are the biggest challenges for integration back into the workforce from a vet standpoint, as an individual standpoint from them?
I think the biggest challenge that I felt was that loss of camaraderie when I stepped off of base. Because the military is such an inclusive, all-encompassing part of your life, you really get a sense of like, that's your family. And for a lot of us, that was the first time we ever felt that sense of family. So you come out of the military, you no longer have access to that family. And then at the same point, from that high adrenaline state that we live in the military, from the different things we do, you come back to the civilian world and it feels very gray and boring and dull. This is the best way I could describe it. And so because of that, I really struggled at first of finding a mission, finding a meaning, finding a purpose. Going to work to just get a paycheck didn't do it for me. And I know that doesn't do it for a lot of civilians either, but from where I was at to where I was now, it was a really tough transition to make it over that hurdle and figure out, who am I now that I'm not a Joe? Yeah. Like who am I now today? And what is my mission and purpose in life? There was a lot of internal discussions about, why are we doing this?
Are they even coached in that aspect of how to of almost expect this, and this is what you can do to kind of coach them with that? or not at all?
No, we don't talk about emotions in the military. We don't talk about psychological health. We don't talk about any of that. Really unfortunate, because what most of us do, and men more so than I think women, but women do it as well, especially in the military, because there's a lot of things that happen to our female vets that are completely unacceptable. But we tend to put things into boxes, emotional boxes. And so you just shove that down into a box, and you jam it closed, you nail it shut, you chain it up, and you shove it in the back corner of your brain, and you pretend it's not there. At some point in time, somewhere in the future, all those boxes are going to fall over and they're going to break open. And when they do, it's usually not good.
I've talked about emotional leakage in some of my videos, and I can elaborate on this later, but it is a thing. It is a thing.
It's a very real thing.
Communicate it, but people aren't even taught how to communicate. Not even people who are not in the military, they don't know how to handle those emotions or communicate.
We've seen it in construction. We've seen fights on job sites.
Oh, yes, I've talked about that too. But now, absolutely, that's what I'm trying to learn is not avoiding or discarding your emotions. It's identifying it and then knowing how to control it yourself. You don't have to announce it to the world that you're having an emotion,
But in the day of Snapchat and all this, how can I not announce it to the world? That goes against our entire selfie culture. Come on, Amy.
Well, then use an emoticon over your face. Is that how you even say that? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Emoticon?
Emoticon, emoji, I don't know.
Butchered that.
There was a movie, the Emoji Movie, so I think it's emoji.
Yes. In your opinion, are there more industries that are more conducive for this integration of just, from vet to workforce, that maybe are a little more, not necessarily even accepting, but just an easier transition? It's not going to be seamless, I know that, but at least an easier transition?
The short answer is absolutely. There are industries I believe are very much more, very, very geared towards the veteran community. But I think it's important to delineate. There's a huge difference between officer corps and enlisted corps. So if you think about it from a construction aspect, your officers would be your project managers, your operation managers, stuff like that. Your enlisted corps would be more of your foremen, carpenters, laborers, superintendents. That's more of the enlisted side. Obviously, there's some exceptions. There's the administrative clerks and stuff in the military. They're going to probably want to be more on the office side of things. But any of your blue collar work, tangible physical labor kind of work, most of us that go in the military out of high school, we never wanted to go to college. We don't have any interest in college. Trade school, sure. Unions, possibly. But certainly the blue collar industries, so whether it's mining and excavating, oil and gas, road construction, building construction, residential construction, all of those types of industries.
So then construction sounds like a great fit.
Absolutely. Amazing fit.
Done. Do you, since you have both the construction and the military background, do you see any specific construction sectors, and you've mentioned, the field side more than the office side in construction, but specifically a certain title or a certain sector of construction that might be better suited, or is it pretty open-ended?
I think for the most part, it's very open-ended. It's going to come down to the individual as to where they're going to feel compelled to go, including to the office side. I know some guys and gals that were very much in the administrative side of the military, and they would rather be in that office side. But because of people's military background, there's a lot of defense contracts where you go in to build stuff on base, or you work closely with the military as well. And so those are very seamless programs for veterans to be involved with. And then they still have some of that sense of camaraderie because they're still on base, they're still interacting with fellow soldiers. So there's a lot of potential there. But with the direction of where our military is going, it's becoming more and more high tech. There's also a lot of construction in and around the data centers, in and around the technology programs, and those types of things. We're seeing a much more sophisticated military than we used to have. And so being able to work with computers and iPhones and tablets and all of the different accessories, there's a lot of real potential there. And the other aspect to veterans is we're ingrained from the day we begin the military with a rank and structure and set of skills of how it means to lead people. So we teach and cultivate leadership in ways that most civilian programs can't. And so if you get a veteran that is really into whatever that particular work is, and you give them the opportunity to start taking on some leadership and coaching them a little bit, they will go to the ends of the earth to make sure that that mission is complete. That's just in our nature.
I think that, I mean, even the construction industry as a whole, we can learn from people who've been in the military, their leadership tactics. I feel like sometimes that falls through because we're so focused on schedule, on money, on time, whatever. You know, we kind of forget that we're working with all of these different people. So I think that that could be a very valuable asset for people who have that experience and can bring that good leadership and that good leadership structure to some of these companies.
Absolutely. And I would expand upon that a little bit because you just reminded me of something. In the military, we talk about squads and platoons and things like that. In the construction industry, you have a foreman and a general foreman and a superintendent, and that structure and the number of personnel in those different groups, work crews, whatever you want to call them, is very similar in design to the construction industry. And I think that was intentionally. I think that post World War I, post World War II, when we were bringing people back from the big wars and there were all those people coming home, the massive highway projects, they used a lot of that military structure out there on the massive highway and infrastructure projects. After World War II, with the housing developments, there were massive numbers of veterans that were building huge tracts of housing, and all again based on that original structure of squads and platoons going out and getting the mission complete.
How do we do this? Is this happening? How do we make this happen?
It's happening in some cases, but not nearly enough.
Okay.
Most of the recruitment for construction seems to happen at the project management level, which is more of the office side. So when I was going to trade programs and actually going to some of the recruitment fairs, it was almost all high level construction, project management level types of opportunities, from the field engineer up to the project engineer to the project manager, that kind of stuff.
Right.
There wasn't a whole lot of recruitment around the actual trades. And so I think that's where we need to do a much better job, because there's a lot more enlisted people than there are officers.
Right.
And so if we can get those enlisted folks to come into the construction industry right out of the gate, they're going to be happier, we're going to be happier, and I think we're going to get a lot more structure and a lot more organization in our construction industry, hopefully resolve some of those conflicts.
Yes, absolutely. They
So,
need a job, they need integration, we need skilled labor force.
yes.
How do we do this? Or as a whole, how can this construction industry as a whole help bridge this gap?
Well, I think the biggest thing we can do is we can learn from the programs that were successful before. There used to be a program, and there may still be a program, called Helmets to Hard Hats. I think there was some others that were doing it as well, and it was basically all about going to the bases and talking to the transition program officers about how to specifically target and recruit from the enlisted corps to get them into the actual trades. And it worked very well for at least a short period of time, because I know I heard about it when we were in college, through the programs that we were going off and doing with the Mechanical Contractors Club and all that.
Right.
But the other aspect is, I think we could talk to some more of the community colleges about revitalizing some of those trade programs, because a lot of the community colleges have gone almost exclusively as a prep for a four-year university, instead of a let's actually teach people the programs that we need to have in a local community. Community college is a much better fit for an enlisted guy than a traditional college is. You just get a much more enriched experience at a community college than you do at a four-year university for somebody that doesn't want to be in college in the first place.
I have talked with other industry members about this too, about what I love about construction is that you don't have to have a four-year degree. There is success in both of going through college, but also not going through college in construction. And you can see those work hand in hand. Somebody who has gone to college, someone who has not, and they still work so well together to create like this great project. So you don't have to go to college for construction. That's what's awesome. I mean,
No,
you
you
can.
don't.
You can, and there's not a detriment to going to college, but you're going to learn a different route. You may learn just different things. But actually learning the trade and the skill and with your hands, at least the college program we went to, it was learning how to work with the people, not with your hands.
Right.
But still, benefits and pros and cons of both. Right?
Well, and it's like anything else. You can't have one without the other. You have to have somebody that understands how to interact with the owner of the building, how to interact with the engineers that are designing the structure, how to interact with the architects that are drawing all the pretty facades and the things that we have to build, as well as the people that have the trade experience of how do you actually put these things together and make them work. Because just because it works on paper doesn't mean it works in the field, and just because you think it works in the field doesn't mean that it's actually going to hold up over time. So it definitely takes all the pieces and parts, and to me that's what most drew me to the construction industry after I actually got into it. Was it reminded me a lot of the military, because you have your officer corps that are all the highly educated, very intelligent office types, and then you have your crusty old sergeant majors and all the enlisted people that are out there getting their hands dirty and crawling around through the most disgusting places sometimes. But as you come together and you find those assets and resources, what each person brings to the process, it does come together as a whole project. And it's very similar in both regards.
That's awesome. And it's a good reminder too, for both office and field side, of just working together. That's what's going to create that product versus, one strong arming the other. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot with guys out in the field as well as from the office, because I have to kind of dance on both sides of the line. Is without the office people, you don't get paid. Without the people in the field, you all don't have a job,
Right.
because if they're not building stuff, you're not getting paid. So like we need each other in this dynamic.
Right.
You have to treat each other with some level of respect, even if you don't like what the other person does. Sometimes you still have to get along, and you still have to accomplish the bigger mission, which is to deliver what your customer is expecting.
Right. Last but not least, is there any advice you can give to our audience of just on an individual level? Some of us don't have the authority for an entire company or an entire industry, but on an individual level, trying to help the veterans integrate back into the workplace.
I think it's a great question. My suggestion to anybody that's dealing with veterans is very simple. When we go in the military, no matter what our background was, no matter what our intention of going in the military, we're really taught about the greater good and the greater mission and putting other people above yourself. And so if you can change your vernacular and focus your intent on helping to identify what that bigger mission is, what that bigger motivation is for the veteran, so that they can understand better their mission and purpose in the civilian world, you'll be much more successful in helping them make that transition. Because for us, and I can't speak for every veteran, but for the majority of us, it really is about that sense of selfless service to others. The paycheck, obviously, we all need to get paid, but it's never the motivation for most veterans. It's really about serving someone else and making sure that they are taken care of, making sure our buddy is taken care of. We need that sense of purpose beyond just a paycheck. Especially in the construction industry, we build amazing things for families that need a new house, for businesses that need a new facility, for whatever the aspect of construction happens to be, major highway construction, and the amount of commerce that brings. So having that message built into, especially for the tradespeople veterans, the enlisted corps, I think would go a long way.
And it's a very tangible outcome.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there's a lot of careers, I think, that aren't, you can't touch it. You can't tangible. You can't say, I built that.
Right.
So I can see that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And
for me, that's what kept me away from a lot of the administrative or office style jobs that they wanted me to do. I couldn't get any sense of purpose out of moving paperwork from this pile to this pile to this pile. It just drove me batty. And so I wanted something that I felt like I was actually accomplishing something.
That makes sense.
Thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate the opportunity to help promote a message that gets more of our veterans back into the workforce.
Absolutely. I appreciate your expertise and your opinions and your tolerance of me throughout this process. We need some skilled labor in construction, and we've got plenty of vets who need a job. So let's put those two together. We got this. I've known you for how many years?
Yeah.
So it's like, who are you? Hassle. Hair.
I don't have that problem.
Yeah, that's good.
I went to a stylist one time and they just burnt the roots right out.
Good. Hey, Deacon.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
How are you today?
Good. You and I went to school together, didn't we?